Hey everyone, welcome back. If you've been watching our series, this is session 4 of our Microsoft Learning Room construction series, focus on AZ-500. My name is Sarah Kong. I'm a Microsoft technical trainer, and this session is Azure Roles versus Azure AD Roles. And I'm joined by the lovely Anja. Hey Anja.
Hi, Sarah. So my name is Anja Thelen, and I'm also a Microsoft technical trainer, and I'm excited to be with you here today.
So Azure roles versus Azure AD roles. Obviously, sounds like there's a difference. Can you explain that for us?
Yes, I would love to. So let me bring up a little whiteboard here to make the point a little bit better. When we're talking about our roles, inside of Azure, we're needing to separate different areas within Azure. Now, let's start out down here with the bottom. We see here our subscription, and this was historically grown our classic way. That's why they are called also our classic subscription administrator roles on how to manage our resources. So we had our subscription. And then we were able to manage our resource groups as well as our individual resources with this. And everything was located inside of our Azure account. Now, when Azure started to grow, we also needed to think a little bit more about structuring multiple subscriptions. Okay, it's not that easy to manage one at a time. It's just very time consuming. So, with this thought process, we needed to implement something to manage this, something like group policies, groups inside of management groups inside of Azure. And those management groups allow us now to implement our Azure roles. They're focused on our resources inside of Azure. Okay, so you are within the Azure world. Not It's not about access from the outside, it's what you can do with those resources. So our standard roles are owner, contributor, and reader, as well as our user access admin. And then we have resource specific roles. Think about a virtual machine contributor or a database reader. Those are individual resource roles. But this is focused on our resources. What if we actually want to manage our users? What if we want to allow them certain things in our environment to manage other users? And that's where our Azure Active Directory roles are coming into play. We're having those completely separate from our resource roles, meaning we can delegate access and our user accounts management into different parts of our environment. And our Azure Active Directory roles are our global admin, our application developer, billing admin, anything that has to do with finances is then just directed at the Azure Active Directory tenant there.
So would it be safe to say that, like, looking at this and how you just explained that, the Azure AD roles both are basically more administrative roles, and then the Azure roles, like you said, are resources roles. So the Azure roles looks like you would go into a resource and then the IAM, identity access management, and configure it there. And then the Azure AD roles, you actually configure them at the tenant, right?
Absolutely, you're absolutely right.
Wow.
So if you're wanting to set up those resource roles, you're going into your Azure subscription. Actually, on the management group level, you could go and you're going to select the IAM tab to then address which role you want to assign to which user or group in your environment. While your administrator roles, you're working on the Azure AD, on the Azure Active Directory tenant.
Or now called Entra.
Yes,
Keep
exactly.
saying that in every
We
video,
we
Entra.
need to we need to update our language here.
It's so hard, isn't it?
It is. There's so many different changes going on. Just like this switch from your classic subscription over into the Azure roles. And these classic subscription roles, they are going to go away. Currently, it's set up for 2024. So we always need to work with those changes and stay up to date. Very important.
Cool. So would you be able to show us a little bit of this so we can see what that looks visually in the portal?
Yes, we can do that. Pause the video.
Sorry, I threw that at you.
I was trying to stay just on this, but I don't have enough content for it. So let me
Yeah, I
switch.
figured because that we already talked about everything, and then now that
Hey,
was pretty
hey,
much it. You want to finish the?
you can do a 5-minute video too.
I know, and then just show it, and then we'll recap and then say bye bye.
Let me make this a little bit bigger. Uh-oh. What is that again? I have since last week my PowerPoint. When I'm presenting, all of a sudden I get a red, like it's sharing a weird part of the screen or something. At least I see lines in there. But you should be
Oh,
seeing fine, right? My portal.
yeah. I don't
Okay.
see anything weird. I see
All right.
your portal screen.
Perfect. Let me see that I actually have some type of resource.
Yeah.
Or should I create something for 203?
No, that's fine. You could just click on anything. It doesn't have to be
All right.
that storage account. You can show the IAM in there. Access control. Perfect. All right, I'll count you down. 5, 4.
All right, let's have a look at the portal, how this looks here. I opened a storage account, and for our resource roles, we're going to go over to the access control blade here, IAM. And now we have the ability, well, we can check access or role assignments and so on, but we can add now here our role assignment. And down below, just for information purposes, that co-administrator, that's that classic role that we talked about just a few
Right.
minutes ago in there. So if we hit add role assignment, we're able to see all of the different job function roles as a first tab in here. So here's, for example, our reviewer, different operator roles in there. And I always like to use the search bar. So contributor is a good way to search for the individual elements. Note also that your roles are dependent on where you are inside of your resource hierarchy, meaning when you're at the resource, we're at the storage account right now. So it will show you all of the resource roles that you have for the storage account. You don't need a virtual machine contributor in this case. So it's pre-filtered for you here. Okay. You just select the one that you want, maybe this one. You select next, and then you add your individual users, groups, or service principal, or your managed identity to your role assignment here. And then you can add your individual members to this. And then you would be reviewing and assigning this to the individual scope that you're at, scope inside of your resource hierarchy, meaning in this case, we are looking right at our storage account here.
And I understand that if let's say instead you decided to add this Azure role at the management group, then at the storage account, it would already be there and there'd be no way to remove that, right? Because it all inherits, right? That's one of the big
Absolutely.
things to note, right? Because you can't block inheritance. There's no way to remove it. You would have to go at the hierarchy level to get rid of that.
Exactly. And the higher you go, so if I would go now to the resource group level as an example, I got that IAM blade
Yeah.
here again. And now if I would add, you see, I can even add now a custom role because we're on a different level inside of the hierarchy. And I can add my role assignment, and the role assignment will now have, you see, way more roles because inside of a resource group, you could have any type of resource. So you want to possibly pre-assign the roles to your users or groups before you actually create the resources in there, or there will be more resources later that you add. So you can predefine this in here. And again, it, like you just said, it's inherited. So the higher you go, the more important it is to figure out what exactly you want to assign to which user
Right.
or group because you can't block it.
And so then the Azure AD roles, where would you go in there? The tenant, I would assume, right?
Yes, exactly. So inside of the Azure AD roles, we're going to go over to Azure Active Directory. Now, I'm a very visual person, so I like to say, hey, notice that when you're talking now about roles and administrators for our Azure Active Directory, you got this little green person
Mm,
here. Okay, so visual information where it is. And then you go into the all roles elements, and all of a sudden you see roles that you didn't see before. Application administrator, application developer, all these have to do with managing your users and groups in your environment, as well as other identities and who has access to which of the elements here. So if I would select the application administrator here, for example, I don't have any active assignments, but I can add now an assignment to this to see at which scope now which members have access to the resources that are going to be in there.
yeah. And just to let everyone know that in another video, we will talk about privileged identity management because it is PIM's a big security function, especially in the AZ-500 exams and everything, that you really want to have a very good understanding of that because a lot of times you'll want to give access for a time period or people need to request access. And that's kind of what PIM's all about. So this has been neat. Anything else that we should know about Azure roles versus Azure AD roles?
Yes, I'd like to add that you can add a custom role on
Mm,
both levels
nice.
in there. You just need to remember where you are creating this role and what type of elements you can access them with each of the roles. So if we create here a custom role, we're talking about our Azure Active Directory and which permissions are then set up. And this is actually a real cool overview because you can see directly at which level those permissions are applying in here inside of your role and what the description is. So you can create your own custom roles in both our Azure Active Directory environment as well in our resource roles there.
Yeah. And the nice thing to know about custom rules too is that it's a JSON file too that you can build and then you can push that out using PowerShell because some companies might not have access to the portal .azure, so that this actual UI, so that it is available to do it through command line as well, use it and building those JSON files using your resource providers. Yeah,
Yes,
this has been
and
good.
on top of it, you are in control about over these roles then. That's another piece. So any
Yeah.
type of the built-in roles that we have inside of Azure, they will be managed by Microsoft. So you don't have, if you would make changes to the role, they would be overwritten if there's any changes. These roles, these your custom roles, you're managing in your environment, meaning if there's some changes coming in, you may need to update your role in time.
Right. Yeah, good point. That's a very good point. Yeah, this has been really good. So Azure AD roles, they're more like administrative roles. So they're set up within the tenant itself. And then you've got your Azure roles, and those are more of your resources, right? So virtual machine contributors, storage account contributors, those type of roles. And then you set them up at either, it doesn't matter in the hierarchy, but you use the identity and access management configuration to do that. Cool. Great.
Exactly.
So thank you, Anja. Any last words for our learners for the exam or anything like that?
Well, thank you for watching us. And yes, this is a big topic on the exam, and you want to be able to, for example, distinguish the different types of administrators or roles that you have, getting a feel for how the JSON looks in the background, how you identify where you are in the environment. So big topic, and there is more to learn.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, it's all about that hierarchy and where you place your permissions is essential for everything, right? For the exam as well as for doing that in production. So thank you, everybody, and keep on learning.